Ever feel like you're just endlessly rearranging boxes when it comes to your company's org chart?
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, hold on to your hats because today we're diving deep into Company A's Organization Design Toolkit. And let me tell you, they've got a whole different approach going on.
Totally different ballgame. They really go beyond just moving those boxes around on a chart. They get it.
You got that right. You know, you sent us this toolkit, and it's dense, right? So it seems like you were looking for that secret sauce, that aha moment for how Company A approaches restructuring.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, you know, one thing that jumped out at me was how they use data. It's almost like a surgical approach to uncovering hidden inefficiencies.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? They go beyond just looking at headcount, which so many companies do. They dig deeper with FTE analysis that's full-time equivalent, right?
But here's the really insightful part. They use this FTE data to not only pinpoint those current bottlenecks that are slowing them down, but they're even looking ahead to predict future skill gaps. It's like organizational fortune telling in a way.
Now that's getting ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
That has to be a game changer. So it's not just who's doing what, it's what skills will we even need down the line. That's incredible foresight.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's that forward thinking that really sets their approach apart. And they've got this 6-phase process that they outline in the toolkit. And get this, it all starts with a rock solid business case. None of that, the CEO decided we're doing this. This is serious business.
Well, no more reorgs on a whim, huh? Wow, I bet that makes for some interesting boardroom conversation. Yeah, you can say that again. They are serious about justifying every single change, right? They detail out the why with this, almost forensic detail.
Wow.
Yeah, and they even highlight a case study in the toolkit where this one department, they thought they needed a total overhaul. But by going through this rigorous analysis, they actually realized that just a few strategic tweaks were all they needed.
Wow.
Saved them a ton of time, a ton of money, probably a whole lot of stress, too.
Talk about dodging a bullet. That's amazing. And you know what? I bet that makes everyone more receptive to change in the long run when they know it's not just change for change's sake. Like, we've actually thought this through.
It builds trust, right? It
Yeah.
builds buy-in from the get-go.
Yeah.
And then once they've established that rock-solid why, they move into, what they call the gap analysis phase. So that's all about understanding the current state of play.
Okay, so let's talk about this gap analysis a little bit. They've got this whole toolbox they use, right? What are some of the tools that stood out to you?
Well, besides that FTE analysis we were just talking about,
Yes.
there's this thing called the RCI matrix, which I know it sounds a little jargony, right?
It does sound a little jargony when you say it like that.
Yeah, well, it's really not that complicated. It basically boils down to assigning roles and responsibilities with laser precision.
Okay.
It's kind of, imagine you're designing a car, right? You don't want any ambiguity about which part is actually responsible for the steering.
You definitely want to know who's steering the car, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what the RCI matrix does for an organization. It makes sure that everybody knows, okay, who's driving, who's navigating, and who's just along for the ride, It's about clarity and it's about accountability.
Okay, so we've defined the need for change. We've analyzed those gaps using some pretty interesting and useful sounding tools. What's next in Company A's grand plan?
So that is where things get, even more interesting. Phase 3, this is where they dive into designing those high-level structural options. And get this, they have this whole menu, right, of organizational structures to choose from.
Ooh, I love a good menu. So tell me more about these options.
Yeah, so you've got your classic functional structures, you've got divisional structures, and then, of course, the ever-popular matrix structure. But, and this is key, they don't just randomly pick one and say, okay, let's go with this.
Yeah, right. Good luck. Hope it works out.
Exactly.
So how do they decide? How do they decide which structure is the right fit for them at that moment?
This is where their strategic thinking really comes to play.
Okay.
They emphasize aligning that chosen structure with the company's overall strategy, the operating model. So, for example, let's say a company is really all about, global expansion, right?
Right.
A geographically based divisional structure. That might be the winning ticket for them.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you can't imagine having teams scattered across all these different time zones and they're all reporting to someone who's, perpetually on their coffee break when you're trying to close a deal,
Time zone issues are real.
Exactly. So it's all about setting up that structure to best support the company's goals, however the goals are defined.
All right, so they've got their strategy. They've picked their structure.
Yeah.
It feels like we're building a company live right here in the studio.
Right.
But I'm guessing it's not all smooth sailing from here, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's got to be some bumps in the road.
You would be right. Even with the best laid plans, you know how it is. Things can get a little messy.
Wow.
And Company A, they know this, especially when it comes to, you guessed it, the matrix structure.
The matrix structure. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of organizational charts.
Yeah, right.
Things go in and then who knows?
Well, and Company A doesn't shy away from those complexities.
Yeah.
In fact, they dedicate a whole section of the toolkit to taming this beast. They actually highlight seven critical success factors for making it work.
7. Okay, so they're not messing around.
No.
What are some of the highlights, some of the key points there?
Well, first and foremost, they emphasize crystal clear roles and responsibilities. Remember the RCI matrix we were talking about before?
Yeah.
They actually suggest using that as like a preemptive strike, right?
Okay.
Against the confusion, the conflict that can sometimes bubble up in a matrix setup.
And I can see how that would happen. With all those dotted lines, I feel like things could get lost in translation pretty quickly.
Exactly. And that's why they also stress the importance of having like really robust information systems, right? To support all of that cross-functional collaboration that needs to happen. Can you imagine trying to navigate a matrix structure with nothing but like sticky notes and carrier pigeons?
Oh, the lost memos. I can only imagine.
Total chaos.
So we've got clear roles, we've got strong communication channels. What else is on their matrix survival checklist?
Performance management is another biggie.
Okay.
When you've got people reporting to multiple bosses, it is absolutely crucial to have a shared understanding of what success actually looks like, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've got people getting pulled in all these different directions with no clear sense of how their work is actually contributing to the bigger picture.
It's like trying to win a game, but no one knows where the goalposts are.
Exactly. It's just setting them up for failure.
Yeah.
So they've covered the what and the how of performance. But what about the who? Like who actually makes the call when things get a little fuzzy? Do they address that in the toolkit?
Right, because that's always the big question.
Oh, absolutely. They talk about having a very, very clear escalation path, right? For those inevitable moments where decisions need to be bumped up the chain.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to admit that sometimes the answer might be, you know what? We need to rethink this whole matrix thing.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's not matrix or bust. They're open to other options.
Oh, absolutely. They actually offer some alternatives. They talk about, creating centers of excellence, for example, to bring together expertise from different areas without necessarily having that full-blown matrix structure.
Okay.
So it's really about finding that sweet spot between flexibility and clarity.
I feel like flexibility is a recurring theme here for sure. It's like they're saying, here's a toolkit, not a rule book.
You got it. And speaking of toolkits, they have this really, really neat design evaluation tool that they walk through that helps companies kind of like objectively assess their options.
Okay.
And remember those core design principles that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
This tool actually helps companies make sure that their chosen design is actually in alignment with those principles.
It's like a gut check. But instead of relying on your gut, you've got data and you've got this framework to kind of guide you.
Precisely.
Oh, I like that.
And what's really cool is that it can also help surface any potential disconnects between that shiny new structure and the company's existing cultural DNA.
Oh, see, and that's so important because you can have the best org chart in the world, but if it doesn't gel with the way people actually work, it's dead in the water.
Absolutely. Culture can make or break even the most well-intentioned organizational change.
100%. Have you seen that happen? Have you seen, like, where it's just like, on paper, this makes sense, but the culture just kills it.
Oh, yeah. More times than I care to admit.
Right, and it's usually the culture that wins, right?
Unfortunately. Which is why it's so refreshing that Company A clearly gets this right.
Yeah.
They actually dedicate a surprising amount of the toolkit to the people side of organizational design.
Oh, now that's interesting. Tell me more about that, because I feel like, we've all been in those reorgs where it's like they forgot about the humans involved, right?
It happens all the time, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, here's a new org chart. Good luck.
Exactly. But Company A, they stress the importance of bringing employees along on the journey, right? Not just like springing this new org chart on them out of the blue.
Yeah, no Monday morning surprises.
Exactly.
I like how that sounds.
They emphasize two-way communication throughout the entire process. They're actively seeking out employee feedback. They're addressing concerns head on. They're not shying away from the tough conversations.
It's like they're treating employees like stakeholders.
Imagine that.
Right. What a concept.
Novel idea.
So how do they do that? How do they actually bring those employees along?
Well, one of the coolest tools that they use is something called the DLO. It stands for Day in the Life of. And it's basically, they actually walk through what the new design will look like from the perspective of that specific role.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's one thing to see, a new org chart and your name's in a different box, right? But it's quite another to really understand how your day-to-day work might change as a result of that.
Right, totally different.
Exactly, and that's what the DLO helps bridge, is that gap. They get into the nitty-gritty of like, okay, let's say you're a marketing manager in this new structure. They'll map out step by step how you'd be interacting with other teams, who you'd be reporting to, even how your key performance indicators might change as a result.
Oh, wow. So they're really getting into the weeds of it.
It brings that abstract concept of reorganization to life.
Yeah, I like it. It's like test driving a car before you actually buy it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I know what I'm getting myself into.
Exactly. And the best part is that DLOA isn't just for show. They emphasize using this throughout the entire process, from like the early stages, to identify potential bottlenecks early on, to even, communicating those changes to employees in a way that actually resonates.
It's not every day you find a tool that's both strategic and empathetic.
I know, right?
It's like this whole toolkit was designed by people who actually like people.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They're not just shuffling boxes around. They're thinking about the human impact of those changes.
Right.
And that brings us to another really crucial piece of the puzzle, the role profile template.
So we've deload our way to this solid understanding of the new design. But how does Company A actually make sure everyone is crystal clear on what their role is within this brave new world.
That's where this role profile template comes in.
Okay.
Think of it like the job description's cooler, way more detailed cousin.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Tell me more.
Yeah, because let's be real, like marketing ninja,
Right.
that doesn't really tell me if I should be like bringing the creative or, sharpening my spreadsheet skills.
Not at all.
So this template, it's all about removing that ambiguity.
Yeah.
It's a very structured way to capture all the essential details of a role. So we're talking about responsibilities, reporting structures, how performance is measured, even those like nitty-gritty day-to-day tasks.
So no more assuming that manager of something important means the same thing to everyone, right?
Exactly. And you know what they say about assuming? This template is about replacing assumptions with clarity. And they even recommend, you're going to love this, dusting off our old friend, the RCI matrix, to really map out those decision rights and accountabilities within each role.
The RCI matrix is like that trusty multi-tool you bring on every camping trip.
It is.
It's always there.
It really is. It pops up like throughout this entire organizational design process. But what's really, really neat here is how Company A ties those individual role profiles back to the overall performance management system.
Okay, yeah, connect the dots for me on that one.
So think about it. You've redesigned the structure, you've clarified roles and responsibilities, but what if your performance metrics are still stuck in the old way of doing things? That's just a recipe for misaligned efforts, frustrated employees.
Yeah, that's like giving someone a brand new race car, but then judging them on their horse whispering skills.
Right. Exactly. So the toolkit really emphasizes aligning those individual performance goals with that new structure, with that strategic direction. It's making sure everyone's efforts are, rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, you don't want people hitting the gas on yesterday's priorities when the company's made a hard turn towards, a new destination.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that brings us to like the real heart of Company A's approach. It's not just about having this like shiny new org chart. It's about creating an environment where people truly understand their roles, they feel valued for their contributions, and they are set up for success.
It's not just organizational design, it's people-centric design. Wonderful. I love that. As we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners are walking away with today?
I think the big one is that organizational design doesn't have to be this big, scary, mysterious process.
Right.
That with the right tools, a healthy dose of strategic thinking, and that genuine focus on the people involved, companies can create structures that are both efficient and empowering.
I love it. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Till next time, may your structures be sound and your teams even sounder.